Welcome, everyone. I am Bob Wurzelbacher, the director of the Respect Life Office for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and this is our video podcast series that we call Being Pro-Life. Each month, we'll discuss a different topic in the Respect Life arena. We'll hear a personal story from someone deeply affected by that issue. And finally, we'll share ways that you can get involved. This month's topic is domestic violence. Today, we have several guests. Will you please introduce yourselves?
I'm Dr. Sharon O'Brien. I am the director of Catholics for Family Peace Education and Research Initiative. We are in the National Catholic School of Social Service at the Catholic University of America in DC. It's our mission to share church teaching about domestic abuse.
Good morning. My name is Gloria Shepard, and I am from Arizona.
My name is Carol Owens. I am the director of the Office of Life and Family Ministry for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Providence.
My name is Karen McQuarrie, and I'm here today to talk about domestic violence and to share my story.
Okay, well, Sharon, let's start with you. Tell us about what is domestic violence and how prevalent is it in our culture today?
Thanks for asking, Bob. It's those behaviors that one person uses on another that causes harm, and it ranges from both the emotional, certainly sexual behaviors, and physical abuse and violence.
So how prevalent is this in our culture today?
So the current research indicates that 1 out of 3 women and 1 out of 7 men have experienced severe physical violence from an intimate partner.
All right, well, Dr. Sharon, tell us, what is the Catholic response to domestic violence? What do we teach about it?
Church law 1153 makes it very clear that if someone in a marriage is not safe, they have a moral right to seek safety for themselves and their children. So the church on the books has been clear for many years. There's no place for abuse and violence in a Catholic marriage.
Why don't we share a little bit more about what are some situations that are of domestic violence and why is it hard to get out of them and why is it such a big problem today?
We'll hear from our survivors to tell the personal stories. It's imperative to not insist that someone in a domestic violence situation just leave. I mean, that's what we think, right? People should be able to just leave. But the fact of the matter is, on average, 3 women a day are killed by their intimate partner in the United States. And the most likely time that she and her children will be killed is the very day that they're leaving. So leaving, it looks like it's a simple solution. It's actually very complex.
Okay, Gloria, why don't we hear your story?
I remember when it started, I was probably about 4 years old. I remember playing with toys. So it emotionally started with shame for being a girl. And I would hear the conversations and the comments that he would make about why couldn't I have been a boy and things like that. He would blame my mom for it and he would abuse her for it. So then if I felt like, the abuse was my fault. But then the physical abuse started around 4 or 5 as well. I remember being in kindergarten and hiding in my bedroom, hiding in my closet, feeling this imminent doom of, I'm going to die and I'm such a bad person. And all of those mental thoughts came with that physical abuse at such a young age. As you're getting older, then you start to know, I could call 911 or, I should tell a teacher. But you're just so terrified that that person not just hurt you, but you think they're going to kill you or kill your mother. And so you don't say anything. I mean, I would be locked behind a door with him just beating the tar out of me, and my mom would be banging on the other side of the door. He would lock her out so that she couldn't get in. So I learned to not cry as much, to not scream as much if I could. I had thoughts of suicide. I had thoughts of running away, but if I ran away, who would be there to protect my brother and sister, or if something happened to my mother? And as I grew, I was 15, I was in 10th grade. It's like within a week's time, I just decided I didn't care anymore. And I actually put myself in a really bad situation. The people I ran off to hang out with had some guests down from California that were drug dealers, and they had weapons and everything else. And I got locked in a room and sexually assaulted by them. My parents tracked me down through friends. And when my dad found me, he busted into the house, grabbed me by the hair, drug me out of the house, bashed my face into the car, and threw me into the back seat. And this is after I had just been sexually assaulted. My parents pulled me out of high school. I got my GED and went directly into work. So at a super young age, I had a very good job, and I moved out into my own apartment at 17, and I met my two kids' dad, the police officer. So I only knew him for about 2 weeks. We went to Las Vegas, got intoxicated in Las Vegas, and went through a drive-through wedding. My son was born. This man I was married to was abusive. He was an alcoholic, emotionally abusive, and was starting to turn physically abusive. So going on after the affairs and all of this stuff, the abuse and everything, I finally was like, okay, I want a better life than this. For my son, I'm leaving. I went to move out and found out I was pregnant with my daughter right after I moved out. So then he threatened me, either you have an abortion or I'm divorcing you. And my daughter will be 18 in April. So obviously I did not go through with an abortion. And so I did get divorced from him.
But was it hard to get away?
It was extremely difficult. Just the threats and the bullying and the, I'm going to take your kids away from you. And I had to go get a restraining order because of the threats. And the court case was drug out for a year and a half. And it was lies and lies and lies. People that are abusive and manipulative, they usually have a support system that enables them and backs them up. And coming out of abuse my own self and not having a support system, I didn't have anyone to back me up. I also could not afford an attorney, and his parents paid for an attorney for him. I had to represent myself. And in my mind, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be like my mom and not protect my kids. So standing up to him, standing up to a court system that I was not familiar with, it was scary. Plus trying to start your life over and not having, like I said, a support system.
Okay, Carol, let's turn to you. Can you share us your story?
Certainly. I was married for 12 years. I had 2 children. At the beginning, it was beautiful. But during my pregnancy for my first child, he started to hit me. Sometimes he would hit me because he was tired. Sometimes because he was not happy with something I had said or the way I looked at him. And it just became a very difficult situation. My family was starting to become aware of it because I couldn't hide the bruises any longer. And my father started to question me about what was happening. And he encouraged me to try to stick it out because by this point I was pregnant for my second child. And he didn't want me to end up labeled a divorcee. That was a big thing back then in the late 60s, especially in my family. So I continued to live with him. I lived with him again for 12 years, along with my children. My oldest child and myself took the brunt of his anger. We were beaten. He was emotionally abusive to us. And oftentimes I would actually prefer to get punched than to have him talk to the way he did, to make me feel like I was a worthless human being, to hurt our child who was innocent because he didn't do something fast enough or good enough for him. And oftentimes we'd have a terrible argument and he'd hit me. And the next thing you know, the doorbell would ring. It would be the police. Come to find out, my youngest child at 3 years old learned how to call the police.
Wow.
And he would call the police and say, hurry up. I think Daddy's going to kill Mommy. And I did not find this out until he was 9 years old, when I finally questioned one of the visits from the police department. How did you know that I needed help? And he said, this little boy keeps calling. They knew my youngest child because he used to call for help. I was embarrassed by the situation. I didn't want family members to know. I started to think I was a very bad person, that I was as worthless as he told me I was.
Wow.
So he did everything and said everything he could to bring me down.
Yeah.
And what happened ultimately is that he beat me so badly one night that I ended up about a week later going to the hospital. The pain, it was in my stomach, and where he had hit me, there were a lot of abrasions on my bladder and my inner organs. And at that point, I think it hit him just how much this had progressed. He came to see me once in the hospital. Soon after that, he left me. And actually, he just didn't come home from work one night. 3 days later, he called me. I was frantic. The children were frantic. Nobody knew where he was. And he told me that he couldn't come back home because if he did, he was going to kill me.
Wow.
And then as time went on, I went through the divorce, and he didn't want anything to do with the children, didn't want to support them, didn't want to see them, told them that he didn't love them. I did eventually, thank God, God brought somebody good into my life. And he insisted that my husband adopt the children so he could avoid all responsibilities going forth.
So Karen, let's turn to you. Can you share us your story?
Back in my early 20s, I began dating a man. He was very kind. He was very charming, had fun together. And then things quickly kind of took a turn. We worked at the same place of business. And to be honest with you, he was my boss. It started off with just things like jealousy. I would want to go hang with my friends, maybe go do something with my family. And in the beginning, he would be like, well, I want to go with you, or why do you want to spend so much time with them? Don't we have fun together? And just kind of make me feel bad for not spending all my time with him. Within a 2-year period of time, it was just gradually getting worse. I can remember I was a student at Wright State University, and I always studied in the same place, the 3rd floor at Wright State Library. I was studying one day, and I left to go get something to eat, and I went to Arby's, and I came back. I must have left at the time that he came looking for me, and I wasn't there. At that point, I was living with him, and when I got home that night, he was really mad and accused me of cheating. And so, all of the name calling and where was I? And I tried to explain it, and, just lots of yelling and arguing. And I just go to bed. He was a 3rd-degree black belt, and he kicked me in the back so hard that I didn't even hit the floor. I just hit the wall from my bed.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a pretty scary night. I can remember sitting at Adventure Golf in Centerville with a friend of mine, and I actually told him, I said, he's going to kill me. I'm going to die at the hands of Bill. I went to my parents' house because it was escalating, and I knew that. So I did not go back to his place. And so the next morning, I went back because I had to go to school. I didn't think he'd be there. I thought he'd be at work, but he was waiting on me, and it got violent. And I called the police, and they heard him threaten my life while I'm on the phone with the police officer. I'm literally running around in the living room with the phone in my hand, waiting for the police. And he acted like a total jerk to them too. Like, they got to see what he was really like. They told him to step aside for me to let me get my stuff. In the end, neighbors and the cops went to court with me and stood up on my behalf. And that was kind of like the last day that I spent any time with him. My brother took my stuff, packed it up, and brought it to my parents' house. And I stayed with my parents. Well, he didn't come to the house. Wherever I was, he was there. If I went grocery shopping, he would show up there. If I went to Kmart, I would take my brother. That didn't matter either. He would still show up. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. He did physical things, but there was also this component of like the mental that just wore me out.
Right.
But it didn't matter what I did, and I couldn't win. If I go to work, he's going to show up at work. And everybody liked him. He was very nice. He was funny. He was charming. He was a boss. So what are you going to do? Stand up against your boss? It went on for close to 2 years. And even after we broke up, he stalked me and my family for about close to 2 years after that. I'm convinced. And people always ask, well, how did you get away? Or like, what made it stop? He got transferred to Indiana, his hometown.
Oh.
And I'm truly convinced that if he was still here, I might not be here, or he would still be doing it. That's when I learned about Artemis. My advocate's name was Shelby. Shelby saved my life. I really mean that. I was sitting at the end of the kitchen table in my parents' house, and my mother was doing the dishes, and I was done. That's what I was saying, is like, I can't do it. I don't remember what it was about, but I was talking to my advocate, Shelby, and I don't remember her exact words to me, but what I remember is she gave me the hope that I could do it. And I had lost that. And it took about 6 months for me to kind of get my breath back. And I can remember just catching my breath. I remember just going, I got this. And from that day forward, my life changed.
Now, we've also heard some of the stories of people who have escaped from domestic violence. Tell us, what is the Catholic response to domestic violence? What are we doing, about this issue, and why is it a pro-life issue?
The bishops created a statement in 1992. It's called When I Call for Help. And it is a clear, concise, compassionate response about how to address domestic violence. It not only addresses the people being hurt, but it addresses the people initiating the pain. It has a whole section about how the clergy and a local parish can respond. And people tell me this all the time. They are shocked and surprised and relieved to read that the first pages of the document, When I Call for Help, makes it very clear that no one is expected to stay in an abusive marriage. In addition, the Pro-Life Office has also recognized the importance of this issue. And in 2013, they created a clear pamphlet and a bulletin insert. It's called Life Matters Domestic Violence, which is very useful.
Okay, so if you go to usccb.org, right in the center, Issues in Action, click on Human Life and Dignity. That's the page for your Respect Life pro-life audience. And then right there on the left, click right there on domestic violence. And here's the page. And right at the top of the page is the first document that Dr. Sharon mentioned, When I Call for Help. You click on that and you can read the text right there on the screen. Or if you scroll down a little bit, you can download or order copies right there online. And there's also a Spanish version for that as well. And also on that same page, you can see Life Matters Domestic Violence. That's the brochure that they were talking about. If you click on web page format here, then you'll see all the text. You will be able to access both in English and Spanish, the pamphlet version, which is this, 4-panel, if you want to print out that kind of thing, or the bulletin insert, which is a beautifully done 2-sided page that you could easily print out and put in your bulletin. So that's where you find those 2 documents that you mentioned.
People could see the USCCB has a long list of resources about this issue, including those from the Pro-Life Office. So that's exciting. And then on our website, our goal is to serve as a resource point for people to share what their Catholic resources are.
So I'm showing this website on the page now. It's catholicsforfamilypeace.org. And then if we go under resources, you can see, for example, the USCCB publishing resources, a pastoral response to domestic violence against women, a resource card. I mean, there's many. But up here, downloadable resources, for example, you can find the booklet, mention how can we help to end violence in Catholic families. You can download a free copy right here.
In 6 languages, Bob. So it's not only in English, it's in Spanish and French, Tagalog. It's in several languages. The good news is across the United States, there are government-funded domestic violence response agencies, and the bishops and our office, we highly recommend that people call the National Domestic Violence Hotline for help to figure out how to leave safely, because it is the most likely time that the woman and her children will be killed.
Well, let's show that real quick as well. Of course, if you search in your search bar, National Domestic Violence Hotline, it'll come right at there at the top. The address itself, it's just called the hotline.
Yes.
.org, thehotline.org. And right there, you'll find the number. That number is 1-800-799-7233. But 7233 is safe.
They can link any caller to the closest domestic violence response agency. So that's a huge help. They can do some crisis counseling on the line. And as you can see just from their website, they have any number of items that people can click on.
All right. Well, Dr. Sharon, what is it the regular person in the pew can do to help the problem, help people be more aware?
There is a lot that the person in the pew can do. So if I were to summarize, so it would be to absolutely pray. Ask your pastor to include it in the intercessory prayer. It would be to have the National Domestic Violence Hotline number in your cell phone, 1-800-799-SAFE. it would be to either ask or organize some educational program in the church about domestic violence. The National Council of Catholic Women has an excellent resource book available.
Okay, so if we go to nccw.org, there it is, the National Council of Catholic Women. In terms of this document you're referring to, go to the store.
Down here on the bottom right, Women Healing the Wounds resource. So that's for $15, but it's worth every penny. It has turnkey templates of doing a program. And as the opening line says, you can save someone's life by talking about this issue.
Okay.
Another point was, of course, using pro-life activities brochures. Just placing them in common areas in the church would be useful. And when someone has the courage to share with someone else, it's our job to believe them and to remember that it only looks like it's simple. It's really very complex, and everyone's life is on the line about leaving. And if any of our listeners have the means to donate, there are any number of places they can donate, particularly the local Catholic charities, or if they send something to Catholics for Family Peace, we will use it to do national trainings across the U.S.
Thanks to everyone for talking with us today about the evil of domestic violence, for sharing your stories, for letting us know what we can do to raise awareness and to help those who are trapped in some unsafe situations.
Bob, thank you for hosting this podcast. We are delighted that the Archdiocese of Cincinnati has addressed this issue. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, and God bless you guys.
Thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity to share my story.
There is hope, and we're here. And when you're ready, we're ready.
And I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in on this episode of our Being Pro-Life series. Head to the website to view all the links talked about in this episode at www.catholiccincinnati.org/being-pro-life. Thank you again for joining us today, and I look forward to being with you next time.